You may not recognize where I'm at, and you probably, very few people have ever been here, but I am here, and therefore this is where I'm recording. I'm actually at my brother's house, and I'm here because of a snowstorm, which some of you are totally enjoying. But I want to talk about kind of what this house is. So this is the third house that I remember them being in. Of course, they lived in Nashville. Well, maybe the fourth house. They lived in Nashville, and they lived outside of Nashville, and then they lived, fifth house. I'm just adding them up left and right. They lived on Dana Drive, and then they went to Singapore, and then they came back. So maybe I've been to more of their houses than I think. But there's something in the house that represents, it's exactly the same thing, regardless of how many houses. There's a few things that I think I've seen almost in every single house, especially from Singapore, Dana Drive, Singapore, and here. But there's more than that. There's a culture in this house. I'm doing a book for college, seminary. I'm almost done. But it's called Culture Making, and it's taking a whole different look to culture. Now, when I grew up in Norwegian culture, and that meant certain things. I grew up in a Christian culture. That meant certain things. I grew up in a small-town Midwest culture. That meant different things. This author is telling us that culture is what we make and create of what we've been given, where we're at. And if that's the definition, it's basically, he says, what are you called to do in the world? Are we called to transform culture or change the world? If we are to be culture makers, where in the world do we begin? And he goes on to build a premise up that we are to create and cultivate the culture that we're in, where we're at, and we will create culture. This house, this place, the feeling in this place and in about every other place I've been creates a culture. And my kids used to understand it very clearly when they came to Aunt Kristen's. There was a culture, and number one, that culture was she would put food on the table, and they had to at least try it. They found out they liked some things. They also knew that Aunt Kristen always made dessert. But there was some other things other than just food culture. They were welcome here, and they were loved here, and we had fun here between hockey games and craziness. And when you're at people's homes, there's a culture that you are included in, a part of, and you make that culture more welcoming. How do you do it? How do you create and cultivate the culture where you're at? I know that there's many people that I walk into their house because I love people, and I love being a part of people's lives, and I love being a part of people's cultures. So I walk into their world, and I'm accepted. I know exactly what we'll talk about. I know how late we'll stay up, some way too late. I know what we'll eat, or if we bring in food, or if we go out. I know that because I've been with them long enough that I understand how their culture is created and how I fit into it, and how it's creating something with what they have, and how that affects me in a very good way. That's why I keep coming back. So if some of you guys don't want me back anymore, just change your culture and make it not welcoming and not loving and not kind. And yet isn't that what Jesus did when he would go into people's homes and ate with them? Because I think eating in people's homes is the best welcoming, creating culture we can ever be, because that's where we show how we love. When you sit around the table with people, you love people. And Jesus went into places and loved on people that other people didn't really like, and at homes that didn't create the culture that they thought should be created. So just think about it. What are you creating in your world, in your place, in your time frame, where you are, that you've been gifted? What have you been gifted? How are you using that to create and cultivate a culture that is welcoming to people, that people know they're loved, people know they're welcomed, people know they can put their feet up on the coffee table? Okay, now maybe some of you have coffee tables you don't want done, but follow me. If you can put your foot up on a coffee table and have a hole in your sock and you're accepted, that's the culture you want to be a part of. And yet I have been overseas thousands of miles from home, and I have walked into a hut and I have sat down to eat eggs from the chickens that were running around, and I have felt at home. Because the culture that I kind of am a part of is the Jesus culture. It's a culture that takes the love he has shown us, and that's what we make other people feel. It's a comfort culture. Didn't always grow up in a comfortable culture with Jesus. A lot of times the church culture sometimes was condemning and criticizing. So we need to decide what we are doing with where we're at. With where we're at and with what we have. The culture is what we make of that. So go create a culture that's welcoming, loving, thriving, making people feel loved, making people feel valued, bringing people into your homes, letting them feel loved. And it's really, really an interesting thought of a culture. We talk about different cultures having different, I think it's more ethnicities than anything, because I grew up with lefse and lutefisk and pickled herring, and that was a culture in itself. It was a Norwegian culture. My grandma grew up in the German culture with hot potato salad and German speaking. So we all are from different ethnic cultures, and we all live in places where cultures kind of tell us some things. But once you open the door of your home, you create your own culture. You create a culture of love, of warmth, of acceptance, of kick back, put your feet up on the coffee table, and you can come to my house anytime, and I will make you fresh hot chocolate chip cookies, and I will feed you, and I will listen to you, and I might make you help me do a crossword puzzle. You might have to listen to some of Jim's jokes. You might have to pet the dog a bit. If you can make it to Minnesota amongst the snow, come on. But I think the bigger question is, where you're at, do you create a culture of love and acceptance? And are you creating with what God gave you to make your own culture the most beautiful culture, where you are, in your home? And when people come, like here I am in a totally different place, what do I feel? What does it matter? It's a culture that is full of love. Have a great one.